AITA for refusing to be listed as the father after my fiancée returned 7 months pregnant? I'm Blake, 35, and I was engaged to Ava for almost 3 years. For most of that time, I thought we had one of those relationships that seemed boring from the outside because it was actually stable. We planned things. We talked before making big decisions. We knew each other's families well enough that holidays had started blending together. Ava was 32 and very close with my mother, Elaine. My mom used to joke that she got the daughter she never had, which always made my actual sister Marisol roll her eyes. From the beginning of our relationship, Ava was very clear about one boundary. She wanted to wait until marriage before we slept together. That was not something I pushed back on. It mattered to her, so I respected it. She used to say, "Love is a choice. Anybody can want somebody. Choosing them every day is what matters." I believed her. At one point, we even picked a line for one of our invitation samples that said, "Chosen every day." It was a little corny, but at the time, I liked it. We booked a wedding venue, put down deposits, ordered samples, built a guest list, and got far enough into planning that both families had opinions about things nobody should have opinions about, like napkin colors and whether a Sunday ceremony was inconvenient. My parents were involved. Ava's parents, Denise and Victor, were involved. My mother was especially involved. Looking back, there were warning signs that Ava was getting restless, but nothing that felt big enough to justify suspicion. She started saying that everything in our life was planned. At first, I thought she meant wedding stress. Then she started saying I was safe. Safe had always sounded like a compliment to me. With Ava, it slowly stopped sounding like one. She met Nolan through people we both knew. He was 34, charismatic, spontaneous, and the kind of person who could make a bad idea sound like a story you would tell for years. I did not hate him when I first met him. I did not know him well enough to hate him. What I noticed was how Ava changed when she talked about him. She would bring up something he said, and then watch my reaction. She would compare how he handled the situation to how I would handle it. She started using words like alive, seen, and chosen in ways that made me feel like I had somehow failed a test I did not know I was taking. One night, about 4 months before the wedding, she finally said it plainly. "You make me feel safe, Blake." I remember saying, "I thought that was supposed to be a good thing." "It is." She paused too long. Then she said, "But he makes me feel seen." That was the first time she admitted there was an he. I asked if something had happened between them. She said no. I asked if she wanted something to happen between them. She said she did not know. A week later, she did. The engagement ended in our living room with Ava crying and me sitting across from her, trying to understand how a woman who had spent years telling me that commitment was a daily decision had apparently made a different decision without mentioning it until the end. She told me she did not want to cheat. She said that like it was supposed to make things cleaner. She said she had feelings for Nolan and needed to find out whether they were real. I asked whether our engagement was real. She cried harder. I took the ring back. I did not throw it. I did not call her names. I did not call Nolan. Ava packed some things that night and came back for the rest over the next 2 weeks. Both families found out quickly. My mother was devastated, but in a strange way that focused almost as much on Ava as it did on me. "She's confused," Elaine kept saying. I remember answering, "She's not confused about ending the wedding." My dad, Graham, was quieter. He said Ava had made her choice and I should focus on dealing with the contracts, deposits, and practical fallout. That part was ugly. The honeymoon was canceled. We lost money on 2 vendors. A photographer returned most of the deposit but kept a cancellation fee. The venue was more complicated. We had a remaining credit of $6,800 attached to the old wedding account after the cancellation terms were applied. The credit could be used toward a future event within a certain window, but there were administrative restrictions and transfer rules. At the time, all I wanted was to stop talking about the wedding. Ava and I had one short conversation about it. I asked, "What do you want to do about the venue credit?" She was already staying somewhere else by then. She said, "I don't know. We can deal with it later." I should have dealt with it then. That is one of the parts one own. I was so determined not to become the bitter ex-fiancé that I confused avoiding conflict with handling things properly. I removed her from a few shared accounts, canceled the honeymoon, changed passwords, separated what needed to be separated, and then let the venue account sit because I did not want another argument over money. My email remained listed as the primary contact. My card information also remained in the venue's system from the original contract, although no new charge was supposed to be authorized without confirmation. I knew that in theory. Then I stopped thinking about it. For the next several months, I did what people do after a breakup that is public enough for everyone to have an opinion. I answered the same questions repeatedly. No, we were not getting back together. Yes, Ava was with Nolan. No, I did not want updates. Yes, I was fine. I was not fine, but I was functional. The hardest part was not losing Ava. It was realizing how much of my identity had been tied to being the reasonable person in the relationship. People kept telling me I was handling it well, so I kept handling it well. I did not post anything online. I did not correct every relative who repeated a softened version of why the wedding had been canceled. I did not tell people that Ava had started seeing Nolan almost immediately. I did not bring up the irony of someone who had preached discipline and waiting suddenly deciding that her heart required spontaneity. I let her go. About 8 months after the engagement ended, Ava texted me, "Can we talk in person?" I stared at the message for several minutes before answering. About what? She replied, "It's important." I almost said no. Instead, I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop during the afternoon because I wanted a public place and a short conversation. I got there first. When she walked in, I understood why she had insisted on meeting in person. She was very pregnant. Not slightly. Not, maybe she gained weight. Pregnant. I stood up automatically, then sat back down because my brain had stopped knowing what the correct social behavior was. Ava looked exhausted. She put both hands around a cup she barely touched and said, "I know this is a lot." I said, "How far along are you?" 7 months. I did the math without meaning to. She saw me doing it. "It's Nolan's," she said. I leaned back. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "He's not involved anymore." What does that mean? It means he's not relevant anymore. I remember that sentence because it immediately bothered me. "He's the father," I said. "That makes him pretty relevant." Ava looked away. She said Nolan had changed once the pregnancy became real. He had been excited at first, then evasive. He missed appointments. He started saying he was not ready. Then he moved out of the apartment they were sharing and stopped returning most of her calls. I asked whether he disputed that the baby was his. She said no. I asked whether he had said he would not help financially. She said, "I don't want to talk about him." That was when I understood that this was not just an apology meeting. I asked, "Why am I here?" Ava started crying. Not dramatically, not loudly. She just looked tired and ashamed. "I made a mistake," she said. I did not answer. She continued. "I thought being with him would feel different. It did at first. Everything felt intense. I thought that meant it was more real. And now I know what real was." That line could have worked on me once. Maybe even 6 months earlier. Instead, I said, "You mean stable?" She flinched. "I mean you." I waited. She said, "You were always home." I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny about it. That sentence told me more than anything else she said. Not, "I love you." Not, "I miss you." You were always home. I asked if she wanted to get back together. She said she did not expect me to make that decision right away. I asked what she did expect. That was when she brought up the baby. She said the baby needed stability. She said she knew I was not the biological father. Then she said biology did not have to define family. I said stop. She did. I asked, "Are you asking me to raise Nolan's child?" She said, "I'm asking you to think about what we had." That's not the same question. She started crying again. Then she said there would be hospital pre-admission paperwork later and that there were ways for me to step in if I wanted to. I told her very clearly, "I am not signing anything." She said she was not asking me to do it that day. I said, "I'm telling you now so there's no confusion later." She looked hurt. I felt bad. That is important. I did feel bad. She was pregnant, scared, and had been abandoned by the man she left me for. I could see that she was not acting from some cartoon villain plan. She was panicking. But panic does not create an obligation for the nearest dependable person. I left after about 40 minutes. The call started within 3 days. Denise called first. Ava's mother had always liked me. During the engagement, she used to tell people I was the kind of man you could build around. That phrase felt different now. Denise said, "I know Ava talked to you." I said, "She did." "She's terrified." "I know." "The baby is innocent." "I know." Then Denise said, "Some men become fathers by love, Blake." I had not told anyone about the paperwork conversation. That was the first moment I realized Ava had already discussed me with her family as more than an ex. I said, "I'm not becoming the father." Denise sighed like I was being difficult about a dinner reservation. "She is not asking you to erase what happened. She asked me to consider raising the child. She asked you to keep an open heart." "No, those are different things." Denise told me I was still angry and should not make a permanent decision from anger. I said the decision was not made from anger. It was made from the fact that I was not the father and did not consent to becoming one. She ended the call by saying, "I hope you remember who you are." My mother called that night. Elaine was softer. That made it worse. She asked if I still cared about Ava as a person. I said yes. She asked if I believed children deserved stability. I said yes. She asked if I thought people could make terrible mistakes and still deserve forgiveness. I said yes. Then I asked, "Are you building towards something?" She went quiet. Finally, she said, "I just don't want pride to make your decisions for you." I told her I was not going to date Ava again, raise the baby, sign anything, or financially support the pregnancy. Elaine said, "Nobody is asking you to decide everything today." That sentence sounded almost exactly like Ava. A few days later, my father called. Graham is not someone who usually inserts himself into emotional situations. His position was basically that I should stay calm. He said, "Your mother is worried you're reacting from hurt." I asked if he knew what Ava had asked me to do. He said, "Something about being there for the child." I said, "She wants me to become the father." He paused. Then he said, "That seems like a bigger conversation." Yes. He told me not to sign anything until I knew exactly what it meant. I almost said, "Thank you for reaching the minimum reasonable conclusion," but I let it go. At that point, I set rules. I texted Ava and put them in writing. I told her I was willing to have one more calm conversation if she wanted to apologize or explain what had happened. I was not willing to sign hospital paperwork. I was not willing to be listed as a father. I was not willing to provide financial support. I was not willing to be presented to relatives as though we were reconciling. And I needed her to stop saying Nolan was irrelevant because he was the biological father, and that fact was the center of the situation, whether she liked it or not. Her response came an hour later. "I understand." Then, 5 minutes after that, "I just wish you would meet me where I am instead of making everything sound legal." I did not answer. 2 weeks passed. My mother kept checking in. Denise sent one more message about healing. Victor, Ava's father, called me once and was more direct than everyone else. "You already built a life with her," he said. "This is not as impossible as you're making it. We didn't build a life with a child. You were going to have children. With Ava. In our marriage. Not like this." He got quiet. Then he said, "Nolan is unreliable. That sounds like something you should discuss with Nolan." Victor did not like that. He said pursuing Nolan for support would make everything uglier. That sentence stayed with me too. Not harder. Uglier. That was when I started to understand that a lot of this was about appearance. The pregnancy timeline was embarrassing for Ava's family. Nolan leaving made it worse. Denise did not want relatives asking questions. Victor did not want months or years of conflict over money and responsibility. And I was the cleanest solution. I was already known. Already approved. Already connected to both families. Already someone they could describe as forgiving instead of someone who had been replaced. Still, I did not know how organized any of this was until I got the email. It came on a Thursday morning. Subject, updated event balance. I almost deleted it. The venue had sent automated messages before, and I assumed it was some old system issue connected to the canceled wedding. Then I opened it. The event date was that Sunday. The event type said baby shower brunch. The account referenced our old wedding contract number. The updated balance was $2,400. My name appeared as a contact. I read the email 3 times. Then I logged into the old venue portal. There it was. The $6,800 credit from the canceled wedding had been applied toward a new event reservation. The event was under Ava's name and Denise's name. My old payment method still appeared on the account. I called the venue immediately. The coordinator I spoke with was polite and clearly had no idea she was standing in the middle of a family disaster. I gave her the contract number, verified my information, and asked how the credit had been moved. She explained that because the account had originally been opened jointly for our wedding and the credit remained attached to the contract, someone had contacted the venue asking to use it for a family event within the eligible window. I asked, who authorized using my card? She said no new charge had been processed yet. The $2,400 was the remaining balance after the credit and event changes. I said, is my card the payment method scheduled for the balance? She checked. Yes. I felt something in me go cold. Not angry. Clear. I said, remove it. She told me she would need to send an authorization change form. I completed it while we were on the phone. Then I asked for written confirmation that I was not the sponsor, guarantor, or payer for the baby shower. She said she could document that I disputed participation in the new event and remove my card. I also asked what would happen to the old credit if I withdrew from the event use. That part was messy. Because the original wedding contract had already been canceled and the credit had been transferred under the account terms, reversing it would trigger a cancellation and administrative charge. The amount was $1,150. I could fight over how the rest should be allocated, or I could instruct the venue that no portion associated with my payment information could be used as authorization for new charges and accept the contract loss necessary to close out my involvement. I asked for everything in writing. She sent it within the hour. I printed the email. Then I called Ava. She did not answer. I called Denise. No answer. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring. I asked, do you know anything about a baby shower at the wedding venue? There was a pause. Too long. Elaine said, Blake, before you get upset. That was all I needed. You knew? I knew Denise was trying to put something together. With my wedding credit. It was sitting there. With my name and card still on the account. No one was trying to steal from you. That is not what I asked. She started talking faster. She said the credit was going to expire eventually. She said the shower was family. She said Ava had already been through enough. I asked, did you know I had not agreed to this? My mother went silent. I said, you knew I had not agreed. She replied, I knew you were still processing. That was the moment something changed between us. My mother did not think my refusal counted because she had decided it was temporary. I said, I told you no. She said, you told me you were hurt. I told you no. She said, sometimes men become fathers before they feel ready. I had to close my eyes. Mom, this is not my child. I know that biologically. Then stop. She started crying. She said she was trying to help me choose grace. I said, you do not get to choose that for me. Then she said something that made the whole thing even stranger. Please just get through Sunday before you make this bigger. I asked, what happened Sunday? She said, the shower. I said, I'm not going. Another pause. Then she said, Ava is expecting you. I hung up. 5 minutes later, Marisol texted me. Are you talking to Mom? I said yes. She replied, call me. My sister was 29 and had been skeptical of the whole situation from the beginning, but I had not told her much because I did not want to recruit allies inside the family. When I called, she said, I think you need to know what they're planning. I asked who they meant. She said Mom, Denise, and Ava. Marisol had seen a text thread on our mother's phone because Elaine had asked her to help with a flower order and left the conversation open. Marisol did not send me screenshots immediately. She was uncomfortable invading Mom's privacy. Instead, she read me enough of the messages to make my stomach turn. They had been discussing Sunday for weeks. There was a brunch before the actual shower. The plan was to have me attend. Denise wanted to give a toast about second chances. Elaine believed that once I was sitting beside Ava in front of relatives, I would not embarrass her by leaving. One message from my mother said, he just needs to get through Sunday. Once he sees everyone supporting them, I think he'll stop fighting what he already knows is right. Another from Denise said, If he stands next to her publicly, it changes the tone. People will understand they are working things out. Then Ava had written, I don't want him to feel trapped. Denise replied, he won't. He just needs to be reminded who he is. Marisol went quiet after reading that. Then she said, there's more. I asked what. She said there was a reference to the packet. Ava had apparently told Denise that she had information from the hospital about acknowledgement and pre-admission forms. Denise believed it would be easier to discuss after the shower, once emotions were positive. Not necessarily sign them at the brunch, but introduce the idea. Make it feel like the natural next step after the public reconciliation. I asked Marisol to send me pictures of the relevant messages if she was willing. She did. Then she said, they are not asking you to come. They are setting a stage and hoping you will be too decent to walk off it. That sentence was the clearest anyone had been with me. I spent the rest of Thursday getting organized. Not plotting revenge. Organized. I saved the venue email. I saved the written confirmation that my card had been removed. I saved Ava's texts. I saved Denise's message about men becoming fathers by love. I saved a voicemail my mother had left after I hung up. In it, Elaine said she hoped I would remember the family we were supposed to become and asked me not to destroy something good because the beginning was painful. I made a simple timeline of the engagement ending, Ava's relationship with Nolan, the pregnancy dates she had given me, her return, and the first time she asked me to consider fatherhood. I did not post anything online. I did not call Nolan. I did not contact extended family. I did not tell the venue to cancel Ava's shower. I only told them I was not paying for it and that my name could not be used as authorization. Friday afternoon, Denise called. Her tone was careful. She invited me to a small family brunch before the shower. I asked why. So everyone can clear the air. Who is everyone? Just family. Ava's family. And yours. I said, is this a reconciliation event? Denise said no. I asked if anyone planned to ask me to stand beside Ava, make an announcement, or discuss hospital paperwork. She got quiet. Then she said, you're making this sound sinister. I asked a question. We just want healing. That is not an answer. She said Ava wanted me there. I told her I would come to brunch. I could hear the relief in her voice. I did not tell her why I was coming. Saturday night, Ava called me. This time I answered. Her voice was small. She said, I heard you're coming tomorrow. Yes. Thank you. I said nothing. Then she said, I don't expect you to love me again overnight. That's good. She let out a shaky breath. I just need you to show up. For what? For me. For the baby. I need one person who doesn't disappear when things get difficult. There it was. The part that almost broke through my anger. Ava was genuinely scared. I could hear it. Whatever else she had done, she was 7 months pregnant and facing the reality that the man who helped create the situation did not want the responsibility. For a few seconds, I remembered the woman I had planned to marry. The one who used to sit cross-legged on the kitchen counter while we argued over playlists. The one who had cried when we signed the venue contract because she said it finally felt real. I said, Ava, I am sorry you were scared. She started crying. I continued, but I am not the person who can fix this. She said, you could be. No. I thought if you saw me, really saw me, you would remember us. I remember us. That shut both of us up. I said, that's part of the problem. She asked what I meant. I told her I remembered respecting every boundary she gave me. I remembered being told our relationship mattered because we chose restraint, loyalty, and patience. I remembered her ending it because someone else made her feel more chosen. Then I said, I respected your boundary. You do not get to use mine as an obstacle now. She said she understood. I did not believe she did. The brunch was held in a smaller room connected to the same venue where the shower would be held later. That detail felt almost cruel. I had stood in that building months earlier with Ava, discussing table layouts for our wedding. Now there were pale decorations near the hallway, wrapped gifts arriving, and a sign with her name on it. I got there 10 minutes early. Marisol was already there. She came over and said quietly, You okay? Yes. You sure? No. That made her laugh once, which helped. My father arrived with my mother. Elaine tried to hug me. I stepped back. She noticed. Graham noticed too. Ava arrived with Denise and Victor. She was wearing a simple dress and looked more tired than she had at the coffee shop. For 1 second, when she saw me, her face changed with something that looked like relief. That was difficult to see. We sat around one long table. There were 12 people total. Immediate family and a few older relatives from Ava's side who had known us during the engagement. Nobody called it a reconciliation brunch. Nobody had to. The seating arrangement did the work. There was an open chair next to Ava. My mother pointed at it. I sat beside Marisol instead. Denise looked annoyed but recovered quickly. The first 20 minutes were painfully normal. Coffee. Fruit. Eggs. People asking about the pregnancy. Someone talking about traffic. I realized that this was part of the strategy. If the room felt normal long enough, the abnormal request would arrive wrapped in family manners. Ava barely ate. My mother kept looking at me. Victor checked his watch. Then Denise stood with a glass of orange juice. She smiled in a way that made my stomach tighten. I just want to say something before we move into the happy part of today. Nobody interrupted. She talked about family. She talked about mistakes. She talked about how real love is not proven when things are easy. Then she said, sometimes second chances do not look the way we imagine them. I looked at my mother. Elaine would not meet my eyes. Denise continued. A child is coming into this family, and I think all of us have an opportunity to choose healing over hurt. There was that word. Choose. She looked directly at me. Then she said, Blake, I know you have something you'd like to say. I did not. But apparently, they thought I did. I stayed seated. I said, who told you that? Denise blinked. She glanced at Elaine. My mother said, Blake. Just my name. A warning and a plea at the same time. Ava whispered, please. I asked her, please what? She said, just say what's in your heart. Victor reached down beside his chair and picked up a large envelope. That was the moment I knew Marisol had not misunderstood anything. Victor placed the envelope on the table. He said, nobody is asking you to sign something blindly. There is information in here. Hospital forms. Acknowledgement options. Things you can review. I looked around the table. A few relatives seemed confused. One older aunt on Ava's side said, I thought they were back together. Denise quickly said, they're talking. I said, no, we're not. The room shifted. Not dramatically. No gasps. Just people looking from one person to another because the version they had been given no longer matched the one I was saying out loud. Ava's eyes filled with tears. My mother said, this isn't how this needed to happen. I looked at her. You are the reason it is happening this way. Graham frowned. What does that mean? Elaine said, not now. I reached into the folder I had brought. I did not dump papers across the table. I did not make a speech as if I had rehearsed it for court. I put one printed venue email in front of me. Then I said, I was invited here so everyone could pressure me into publicly acting like Ava and I are reconciling. I know that because there is a text thread planning exactly that. Denise's face changed. My mother went pale. Ava looked at Marisol. Marisol stared back at her. I was not told the baby shower was being paid for with credit from my canceled wedding. I was not told my old card was still listed as the payment method for the remaining balance. I found that out through an automated email from the venue. Victor said, no one charged your card. Because I removed it Thursday. That stopped him. Denise said, the credit belonged to both of you. The account was still using my name and payment information. It was going to expire. That does not make it yours to use without asking. Ava said, I thought my mom handled that. I looked at her. Did you know the wedding credit was paying for today? She hesitated. Yes. Did you ask me? No. That was one of the few moments where she did not dodge. My father turned toward my mother. Did you know about this? Elaine said, I knew they were using the credit. Graham looked at her for a long time. He asked, did Blake agree? She did not answer. I said no. Then I took out the printed pictures Marisol had sent me. I did not pass them around. I read the relevant lines. My mother saying I just needed to get through Sunday. Denise saying if I stood beside Ava publicly, it would change the tone. The discussion about introducing the hospital packet after people were already congratulating us. Then I looked at Ava. You did not invite me here to forgive. You invited me here to perform. Ava started crying. She said, that's not fair. I said, which part? I told them I didn't want you trapped. But you still came. I thought if you were here, maybe we could talk. We talked already. I was scared. I know. Her voice rose. I am still scared. I said, I know. She put a hand over her stomach. Then she said, you're doing this in front of everyone while I'm pregnant. I looked around the table. Everyone was brought here to pressure me while you're pregnant. Denise snapped. Nobody is pressuring you. We are asking you to think about a child who has done nothing wrong. I said, I have thought about the child. Then how can you walk away? Because I am not the father. A father can be more than biology. Yes, when he chooses that role. Elaine said, sometimes men become fathers before they feel ready. I turned toward her. Stop saying that. She looked shocked. I had never spoken to my mother that way. I continued. You are talking about my consent like it is a temporary emotional problem you can outlast. She said, I am trying to help you choose grace. You knew I said no. You are hurt. I can be hurt and still know what no means. Victor tapped the envelope with 2 fingers. You do not have to sign today. I said, I am not signing today, tomorrow, at the hospital, or after the baby is born. Ava covered her face. One of her relatives said softly, does Nolan know about the baby? I answered before Denise could. Yes. Denise glared at me. The relative asked, and he left? Ava said, it's complicated. I said nothing. That was not my story to expand. Victor said, Nolan is unreliable. I replied, then start with Nolan. He said, this is bigger than who contributed biologically. I looked at him. If you needed a father, you should have started with the man who helped create the situation. That was the harshest thing I said. I knew it as soon as the words left my mouth. Ava flinched. I did not enjoy it. But I did not take it back. Denise accused me of punishing the baby. That accusation had been coming for weeks, so I finally answered it. I am not punishing the baby. I am refusing to become the receipt for everyone else's choices. Nobody spoke for a few seconds. Then my mother said, very quietly, I don't recognize you. That hurt more than anything Ava had said. I looked at her and said, you recognized me well enough to count on me being too embarrassed to say no in public. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Graham looked down at the table. Marisol reached for her coffee and stared at it. Ava was crying openly now. I wanted to leave. Before I did, I explained the venue situation. I said the baby shower could still happen. I had not canceled it. I had removed my card and withdrawn my name as a financial contact. The venue had given the organizers the option to assume the remaining $2,400 balance and continue. The transfer and cancellation cleanup connected to the old wedding contract would cost me $1,150. I was accepting that loss. I said, I would rather lose that money than have this account used to make it look like I agreed to any of this. Victor looked furious. Why wouldn't you just settle it after the shower? Because after the shower, everyone here would have spent a day congratulating me for a decision I never made. Denise said, you could have handled this privately. I almost laughed. You created an audience. She looked away. I stood. Ava said my name. I stopped. She said, do you hate me? I looked at her. No. She cried harder. I said, but I am not coming back. Then I left. The shower did happen. I know because Marisol told me later. It was smaller than Denise planned because a few extras were cut once Victor realized he had to cover the new balance. Nobody was thrown out. Nobody screamed. The venue did not humiliate anyone. They simply required a new payment authorization. That detail mattered to me. I did not want Ava standing in a decorated room while staff dismantled tables because of something I had done. I wanted my name off the event. That was all. The financial cleanup took another week. The remaining wedding credit was reduced by the administrative and cancellation charge. Some of the balance had already been applied under the venue's transfer rules, and resolving it cleanly meant I did not recover everything I could have fought for. I lost the $1,150. Technically, I probably could have spent weeks arguing over portions of the old deposit and whether Ava had authority to move the credit. I decided not to. At some point, a clean ending is worth money. My mother did not speak to me for 12 days. Then she sent a long text. She said she was sorry I had felt cornered. That wording almost made me ignore the rest. But she continued. She admitted she had known I had not agreed to the shower. She admitted she had convinced herself that once I saw Ava pregnant and surrounded by family, I would remember how much I used to love her. She said she had wanted a grandchild for years and had gotten too attached to the idea that Ava was still going to be part of our family. She said, I thought I was helping repair something. I can see now that I was trying to repair the picture in my head. That was the first honest thing she said about it. I did not forgive her immediately. I told her I needed distance. For the next few months, she was not included in much of my personal life. If I was going somewhere, she did not automatically know. If I was seeing friends, she did not get details. If I made a decision, I stopped explaining it to her in advance. That hurt her. It also hurt me. My mother and I had been close. Losing trust in a parent is different from losing trust in a partner because you do not have a clean category for the grief. Ava chose Nolan over me. That was brutal, but understandable in structure. My mother chose a version of my life over my actual consent. That took longer to process. My father apologized too. Graham said he had thought Elaine was encouraging reconciliation in a general sense. He did not know about the venue credit, the planned toast, or the paperwork. I told him he still spent weeks telling me to stay calm without asking what I was being asked to accept. He nodded. He said, "You're right." That was enough for that moment. He and my mother had their own argument about what she had hidden from him. Marisol did not celebrate any of it. She told me she was glad I protected myself and hated that it had come to that. That was pretty much how I felt. A few relatives thought I was cruel. One told my father that I could have waited until after the baby shower to make my point. Another said I had humiliated a pregnant woman. A few others changed their opinion after learning I had never agreed to the event and that my payment information was still attached. I did not campaign for anyone's approval. That was another change. Before all this, I would have explained myself to every person until they understood. After the brunch, I stopped. Ava contacted me 2 weeks later. She asked if we could meet one last time. I said no. She asked if we could talk by phone. I agreed. She sounded calmer than before. She told me she had contacted Nolan again. He had not suddenly become responsible, but she had finally stopped treating him as irrelevant. Her parents were helping her figure out what support and arrangements made sense after the birth. She said she was preparing for the possibility of being a single mother. Then she apologized. Not for everything in one grand speech. Just specific things. She apologized for leaving the way she did. She apologized for coming back to me because I felt safe after she had once used that word to diminish what we had. She apologized for knowing about the shower plan and telling herself it was acceptable because she needed help. I appreciated that. Then she asked, "Could you at least be there emotionally?" I knew what she meant. Not necessarily as a father, as a familiar person. Someone to call. Someone to reassure her. Someone who had once been home. I said no. She was quiet. I told her, "If I stay emotionally available in the way you want, we will keep rebuilding the same bridge you already burned. You will lean on me. Your family will treat that as progress, and eventually I will be defending another boundary." She said, "So you're just done?" "Yes." She cried a little. Then she said she understood. This time, I think she did. I heard through family later that she gave birth without major complications. I did not go to the hospital. I did not send flowers. I also did not make jokes, ask for pictures, or treat the baby like some symbol of what happened to me. The baby was a baby. None of this was the child's fault. That did not make the child my responsibility. Months later, I was cleaning out a box of wedding things I had shoved into the back of a closet. There were RSVP samples, a ribbon from a vendor package, one printed menu, and a stack of invitation mock-ups. Most of it went into the trash. Then I found the one Ava and I had liked most. Our names were printed above the line. Chosen every day. I sat there holding it longer than I expected. For years, I had thought being a good man meant staying steady no matter what other people did. Then after the breakup, I thought being a good man meant staying quiet so nobody could call me bitter. Then when Ava came back, both families tried to turn that same instinct into a job description. Forgiving fiancé, reliable replacement, social father, financial backstop, a man decent enough not to say no once everyone was watching. I kept the invitation sample, not on a wall, not somewhere sentimental. I put it in an envelope and stored it with the final venue paperwork. The contract showed what I lost. The invitation showed what I had once believed. I did not keep either because I wanted Ava back. I kept them because I never wanted to confuse being chosen with being cornered again. A promise means something when both people are living inside it. Once one person leaves, the other person does not owe the rest of his life to the shape of what they planned. I can hope Ava becomes a good mother. I can hope her child grows up loved. I can even forgive her someday without ever speaking to her again. What I will not do is sign my name under a role that was created out of somebody else's betrayal and then handed to me as proof that I am a good person. That Sunday, I lost money, trust, and whatever was left of the future I used to picture with Ava. But when I walked out of that brunch, every part of my life that still had my name on it belonged to me again. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.